Hi everybody. Today we're gonna be talking about Japanese and JDM cars and off-roader that deserve a little bit more credit than people give for. Some of them on the list are super cool and some of them even put Japan on the map because they prove Japan can also make really great vehicles. Let's get started with number 1, Toyota 70 series Land Cruiser. Toyota 70 series Land Cruiser is the Land Cruiser that we never got because we got a Tacoma instead. But they started making these vehicles in 1984 and they are still making them today with the same similar design. I'm not gonna say the same design, but it is basically the same design since 1984. This is the successor to the FJ40. FJ40 has been left in the United States for obvious reason, but this car has modern fuel injection and modern electronic ignition. This is just a way better car to live on day-to-day basis. This is one of those vehicles you can buy off the showroom, drive it into the forest, or use it on a farm. 70 series also offer one of the best engine options in my opinion. One of them is 1HD FTE, which is a 4.2-liter turbo diesel inline-six. You can get that engine in the Land Cruiser 80 series as well, but again, we never got that 80 series in the States. Number 2 on the list, we have Honda S800. This is one of the first ever sports car made by Honda. It has a 790 cubic centimeter engine, which only make about 70 horsepower. However, the car only weighs 1700 pounds, so it's not that slow. It has a top speed of around 100 miles per hour, and it also has individual carburetors on each intake. I think these cars looks pretty good in both roadster version and coupe. Number 3, we have Nissan Petrol. Nissan Petrol is a shame in the States because again it was never popular and very few people know about this vehicle. But this was supposed to be a competitor to the Land Cruiser FJ40 at the time, and I think Nissan made a mistake because it was the first ever vehicle sold in the United States that has a Nissan badge on it. At the time, there was no Nissan, there was only Datsun. So when people walk into the Datsun showroom and saw this Nissan Petrol, they were probably confused. And obviously, the sales were disaster. However, just like the FJ40, this had an inline-six, and they are super reliable off-roader as well. And they also started offering diesel engines in third-generation Petrols. And by 1985, Nissan Petrol became the first ever diesel-powered vehicle to finish in top 10 in Paris-Dakar Rally. And by 1990s, you can get a Nissan Petrol with a RB30 inline-six, which is basically the same engine found under the hood of GTR 32 and 34, and you know the story. But by 1997, which is probably one of the greatest Nissan Petrol here that you can buy, you can get a 4.8-liter inline-six, which can be tuned to make over 1000 horsepower. Number 4 on the list, we have Datsun 510. Datsun 510 and 240Zs were the first Japanese car that put Japan on the map of sports car market. Yutaka Katayama, who was the president of Datsun USA, noticed the success of new class sedans and coupes in the United States. So if you don't know what new class is, these are the cars. These are BMW sedans and coupe from 1960s and 70s, and they were really popular for good reason. They were reliable, they were sophisticated, but not too sophisticated, and those cars handles like dreams. Yutaka Katayama noticed that if Datsun wanted to sell cars in the United States, they have to start making fan vehicles. So it took the inspiration from 1602. I said it because Datsun 510 uses fully independent suspension and overhead cam engine, which are also the features of 1602 BMW. Some people said they copied BMW sports sedan, but I don't think it's actually true. It's more of like an inspiration. And some idiots even claim they were poor man's BMW, but in reality, both the 2002 and Datsuns were poor man's Alfa Romeos. Yutaka Katayama went to the point to prove Datsun can be fun, so he went so far to the point where he started racing these cars in the Trans Am 2.5 series, and those cars dominated in the Trans Am 2.5 series. But to be fair, the fight tanks from those race teams were backed by Pete Brock's Racing Enterprise, who actually helped Shelby with their Cobra Daytonas and Toyota with their SCCA version of 2000 GT. So it wasn't really fair to other teams because the other teams were more independent, but nonetheless, Datsun 510 is a really great car that people are starting to forget about it. And they have a lot of aftermarket options to modify them. You can do whatever you want with those cars. Number 5 on the list, we have the Toyota 2000 GT. This is not an affordable car, but these are super collectible because they only made 351 of these ever. The prototype of the car was actually designed by Yamaha to be used for Nissan, but Nissan didn't want to use it at the end, so Yamaha took it to Toyota, and Toyota was like, yes, I will take it. This was the first ever Japan luxury Grand Touring sports car, which could compete with Porsche 911, Jaguar XKE. It's powered by a dual-overhead cam 2-liter inline-6, which is located in the front of the engine, and sending the power to the rear wheel, which will rocket the car to 0 to 60 miles per hour in 10 seconds, which was actually slower than the 240Z, which was supposed to be its competitor. However, the car had higher top speed and has a 5-speed manual gearbox. Also, there are 3 of those cars shown by Shelby. If you wanted one of those, be prepared to pay upwards of $3 million. This is like the LFA from the 60s. Also, the convertible version of this car was featured in the James Bond You Only Live Twice movie, which was probably one of the highest achievements for Japanese cars because, it was not the same period. People think less of Japanese cars. They thought they were cheaply made, unreliable, and just boring cars, and just the basic form of point A to point B. And this is one of those cars that prove Japan can also make seriously badass vehicles. Number 6 on the list, we have Toyota Sports 800. This is probably my favorite Toyota ever built. This is also their first ever sports car. In Japan, these are also known as Yatahachi, which is like the slang for number 8 in Japan. Anyway, they only made 3,131 of these all total, so these cars are collectible now. And it's really hard to find these cars because they were really light. I mean, these cars only weighed 1,297 pounds, which is twice as light as a Miata. It has an 800 cubic centimeter engine, which only makes about 45 horsepower. But again, this car is super light, so it's super fun to drive, I imagine. When you think about it, this is the root of Toyota Supra, LFA, Toyota A86, and all great Toyota sports cars. This is the beginning, and I think it deserves a lot more credit than people give for being. This is the history of Toyota sports cars. Number 7 on the list, we have the Toyota Mega Cruiser. This is probably the biggest Toyota ever built in the history of mankind. They only made 133 civilian versions of that beast. This is basically Japan's answer to Hammer H1. It has portal axles, which actually give the Mega Cruiser 1.5-inch more ground clearance than the Hammer H1, which is unbelievable. It also has central tire inflation and 4-wheel steering, which Hammer didn't have. So this car is probably easier to maneuver, but I wouldn't want to drive this thing because this is actually powered by a 4-cylinder engine, which is gonna be painfully slow for this car. Nonetheless, I think this is still a really cool beast, and if you want to buy one of these, you're expecting to pay about 6 figures. Number 8 on the list, we have Toyota Century. Toyota Century is a very conservative luxury car. It was supposed to compete with Rolls-Royce and Bentley. However, this car doesn't use leather because leather makes noise, and noise is uncool. It has a V12 engine, but it doesn't make a lot of horsepower. This is the car that you want to be driven in. This is not the car that you want to drive. Toyota is so selective who gets to work on building a Toyota Century. They only let 4 people out of the whole world to paint Centuries, and it is hand painted. And the entire car was sand by hand. Can you imagine that? That has pure quality. I'm just gonna say it again and again because the amount of details that go into that car is outstanding. Okay, number 9. Think about a car made by Mazda that has a Wango engine. You're probably thinking of an RX-7 or maybe even an RX-8, and you are wrong. That's not what we are gonna be talking about. We are talking about Uno's Cosmo. Mazda did not invent the rotary engine. That honors go to the NSU Wango Spider, which is the first ever sports car powered by a Wango engine. However, Mazda was the only car that did not give up on rotary and hold on to the hope of using it in automobiles for as long as they can, and obviously it did not work out. They should have given it a long time ago because I'm not a rotary fan, but I respect their innovation. Uno's Cosmo is the only car that features a 3-rotor engine, aka twin turbocharged 20B with 300 horsepower. That's crazy number back in the 1990. I mean, it's still a good number nowadays, but the downside of this car is they only offer automatic transmission because at the time, Mazda didn't have a manual transmission that can handle the power of 3 rotors rotary. But it is still a very cool vehicle. Okay, number 10, we're gonna be talking about Mitsubishi Galant, Fiat Full, and AMG. In the late 80s, there are actually two special versions of a regular Mitsubishi Galant. There's a Fiat Full version, which was a badass rally car with all-wheel drive, all-wheel steerings, and a 2-liter turbocharged 4 cylinders that make about 240 horsepower. That was the car that competed against Lancia, Integrale, and Celica GT4. You might know about that car if you are into Mitsubishi, but did you know there is also a Galant AMG? Yes, AMG. Back in the days, AMG was independent and it wasn't owned by Mercedes. And Mitsubishi Galant was one of the very few cars that wasn't a Mercedes, but it received AMG goodies. AMG took the engine out, they rebuilt the engine with stronger internals, and they gave it a better ECU, and the car makes about 170 horsepower. And the good thing is, you can get the Fiat Full and AMG version of the Galant for about $10,000. That's if you can find one because they are pretty rare. There are only about 500 of AMG version of Galant ever built. Okay, number 11 we have a Nissan Pulsar GTIR. This is the hot hatch most people forgot about. And if you like Nissan S15, you should like this car too because this is basically the hot hatch version of that same car. It is also powered by an SR20 DET and it makes about 270 horsepower, but it is super light. And the car 0 to 60 at the time, it was 5 seconds. That was faster or about the same as a Porsche 911 from that period. The car wasn't as popular as the WRX in a rally world because it wasn't really competitive. But who cares? If you're driving on the road, this is a way better car and it has a way better engine, in my humble opinion. This is it for my list. Hopefully you like this video.